A new PBS documentary dives headfirst into the Pandora Papers, a treasure trove of leaked documents verifying the existence of offshore tax havens for the world's richest and most powerful.
We're looking at millions of confidential records from within offices around the world whose job is to help powerful people buy and use secretive shell companies.
A massive leak of tax haven documents.
They give you visibility into what people are doing with money that they don't want you to see.
With the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists and reporters around the world, a 2-year investigation into secretive finance.
We have never seen this many heads of state and global billionaires in one location before.
Overseas and in the U.S.
We're talking about people who have been accused of some very bad things, who are using this system to hide their wealth in the United States.
The revelations of the Pandora Papers. Premieres Tuesday, November 9th, 9 Central, only on PBS.
The movie is part of an almost 2-year worldwide investigation with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists drawing on nearly 12 million confidential documents with 2.9 terabytes of data.
Who uses secret offshore bank accounts and why? Here to answer that question are Evan Williams and Will Fitzgibbon. Evan is a producer on the PBS film and Will is a reporter with the ICIJ. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Will, give us a preview. Why should people tune in for this? What's the new information they're going to learn?
Well, I think anyone who's interested in how the rich and powerful live in a parallel universe to the rest of us are really interested by these revelations of the Pandora Papers, because what they show is how if you've got enough money to set up a shell company in a tax haven, to set up a bank account in an offshore jurisdiction, including, by the way, the United States, then a whole world is really open to you in terms of buying property, moving around money, as I said, in ways that really average Joes and Janes just don't use. And that's important because this offshore universe involves leaders of our countries. It involves ministers, it involves celebrities, and of course it involves criminals, and that should concern all of us.
Well, a lot of people have speculated that there might be some intelligence communities at one country or another involved in the leaking of these documents. Is there any absence of information in the data that points toward where this may have come from? In other words, when you get a bunch of documents leaked and only one person's information is not in there, you're like, oh, well, then maybe it was that one person, who was the one who leaked it. Any clues that you've been able to piece together? Because it's extremely difficult, given the surveillance that governments have today, to leak and not get caught. Yet we haven't found out any sources yet which suggest that maybe it was done with some permission of some entity or other.
Well, look, I think there are always going to be conspiracy theorists out there, but that's the great thing about a project like the Pandora Papers, where 600 reporters from more than 100 countries are looking through these $12 million files. Because it might be easy to fool one reporter in one country, but it's pretty darn difficult to pull the wool over the eyes of 600 reporters. That's the power of this collaboration, because all of these records are being searched by journalists around the world. So that means if there's a politician who might get away with it if it was just one newsroom looking into his or her dodgy offshore dealings, then that might, justify or back up what you were saying. But I think that's what makes these collaborations so powerful. No one is spared. And I know where this conspiracy theory sometimes comes from. People ask, hang on, I hear about the Pandora Papers, but where are all the American politicians? And I think experts tell us, Evan and I and other reporters on this project, that there are really quite mundane, boring reasons for that. And that is that US politicians and US billionaires have a lot of ways to avoid taxes and hide their assets, even within the United States. And as big as the Pandora Papers is, the offshore world is enormous. So there's no doubt in my mind that big Americans, political American figures are hiding assets. We just have to wait until the next expose to find that out.
Or maybe they're not hiding them. They're just in plain sight. We all know about it. We all know how wealthy a lot of these politicians are getting and who they're hobnobbing with. I mean, wasn't it Nancy Pelosi was just this over the weekend. She was officiating a wedding for Getty's granddaughter. I mean, one of the wealthiest oil tycoons in the country. I mean,
Did you see the pictures from that, Kim? I tweeted that it's Hunger Games aesthetic in terms of the fashion and opulence. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, it's, to be fair, it was at San Francisco City Hall, which is a very, very beautiful building, but nonetheless, it did look, and it was like in vogue. And so, yeah, I think Americans are pretty aware that our politicians are already wealthy before they get into office. But Evan, tell us about this documentary. Is this multiple series, multiple parts, or is this one long film? Like, what can people expect when they tune into this?
Well, what we did was work very closely with people like Will at the ICIJ and also Debbie Senzipper from the Washington Post and also Greg Miller from the Washington Post. And we told the story of the investigation as much as the facts that they were finding out. So we were filming with them as they first started to go into the documents, as they first started to reach into the data to try and work out what are the stories, who are the people who are in here, what is this actually showing us? So we've tried to tell that story as much as we have then the pinpoints of revelation that these journalists have then found. And we highlighted, we basically focused or settled on three main chapters. One is the alleged mistress of Russian President Vladimir Putin. The other one is the property holdings of the King of Jordan, all held through secret offshore companies. And then, of course, we look at South Dakota and the amount of money going into trusts secretly in that state as well. So it's a journey.
And Chilean President Sebastián Piñera was impeached Tuesday by the lower house of Chile's Congress, setting up a trial in the nation's Senate over allegations that he favored the sale of family property while in office. The accusation comes from leaked documents from the Pandora Papers and revealed that one of Piñera's sons used offshore companies in the British Virgin Islands for sale of the Dominga mining project, which his family co-owned. Will, what have been some of the other results that have come out of this reporting?
So the Pandora Papers reporting started about a month ago now, and we've already seen interest from governments around the world. In Ecuador, the president of Ecuador, who we see in the documents, helped set up trusts in South Dakota. He's been the subject of investigations and calls for his resignation there. We've seen police investigations in countries in Europe, like Bulgaria, for example. Of course, the Czech Prime Minister, who was revealed through the Pandora Papers to have acquired luxury property in the south of France through a number of shell companies. He narrowly lost an election just a week after the Pandora Papers that he was expected to win. So we're seeing the start of these kinds of impacts that come from stories. But also, let's not forget, this is hard stuff. No one's writing an email in the Pandora Papers that says, I just stole $1 billion, please help me hide it. This stuff takes a long time to uncover. And my expectation is that investigations and impacts will continue for months or years to come.
Yeah, Evan, do you think this is a story that's going to take that there's a lot more still yet to come out, and that we'll be talking about for a long time?
I really do. I mean, often you focus on something, as we all do, and then you move on to the next story or the next project. But I've noticed already in the past couple of weeks since the launch of the main investigation, there's new and interesting characters emerging in this joint investigation, and journalists around the world are finding new characters, better stories, new stories. So I think this is and this is 12 million documents. It's taken a long time to get to this point, but I think this is going to be a resource and a trove of revelations, possibly for years, as more and more comes out, because often it's a matter of putting the name in that you might be interested in finding, or going the other way around and finding them by accident in the document. So there's different processes. So there's a lot more to come, I think. And who knows, maybe of more interest to you guys in Washington in coming months.
And Will, do you find more involvement of U.S. shelters in the Pandora Papers than in the Panama Papers? Like, is the world of, we call it offshore here in the United States, but it's not offshore. We're onshoring our offshore activity here. Are you seeing it trending in that direction, more tax evasion and avoidance going on in the U.S.?
Absolutely. And that was one of the big findings and big novel elements in the Pandora Papers. For the first time, we had significant leaked records from within inside the United States, in particular from South Dakota, which really over the past 5 to 10 years has seen its secrecy industry, its offshore, onshore industry expand. That state now has more than $370 billion of money by Americans and foreigners under management within the state of South Dakota. And experts we spoke to, as well as documents that we saw, raise real questions about, is South Dakota, America's least populated state, really sufficiently regulated and controlled to know exactly who is moving millions and billions through the United States? And I think, in the opinion of many experts, the resounding answer is no. And it's not just politicians and foreigners moving money through the United States or into the United States. If we don't know exactly who's behind all of this money, then really the question is, how on earth do we know that there aren't criminals, terrorists, or other bad actors doing exactly the same?
Yeah, I would say the answer is pretty clearly no. It sounds like, what is the benefit to South Dakota? I mean, how much are they skimming off the top?
So there's a number of people in South Dakota who are making good careers from being involved in the offshore industry in South Dakota. But actually, the state doesn't make much money from it. And that's something we revealed in our investigation, that the promises of South Dakota's economic boom from becoming a financial hub really haven't materialized. And that's something that a number of US states have tried to do. Alaska, New Hampshire, Nevada, even places like Wyoming now, are all putting up their hand and saying, oh, this offshore stuff, we might try that. And at the end of the day, governments are just not seeing the benefit. But on the flip side of it, a few people are getting very wealthy, and taxing authorities in some of the world's poorest countries, Dominican Republic, Guatemala, El Salvador, are potentially missing out on millions of dollars in taxes from their wealthiest citizens because those citizens are using the United States.
And then we send Kamala Harris down to Central America to lecture them about corruption and not investing sufficiently. Well, really fascinating. I'm looking forward to watching this documentary. Evan and Will, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And we'll have more Rising right after this.